I think we should be live. Just want to confirm quickly.
Yep, it's going live.
Okay,
We're live.
perfect. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the channel. Hey, Chris. Chris is retired colonel from the U.S. Army. He's done a lot of work in the on the African continent. So I thought I'll have him on as a guest. He can provide us with some interesting insight into stuff happening not only in South Africa but on the African continent in general, I think. Yeah, so please go ahead and check out his channel as well. He has 10,000 subscribers, so he's quite a he's quite larger than me at the moment. Yeah. Yeah, welcome to Coffee Zen, Chris. You're my first big guest. I've had on friends and stuff before on the channel. We talk mainly about tech stuff, so yeah, I think this will be a nice change of pace for the audience and everything else. Yeah, I see some chats coming in there, so yeah, we're good. Yeah, so I would like to ask you about something you mentioned in your previous live stream about education being one of the major factors holding back South Africa, well, the African continent in general. Um, can you elaborate a little bit on that? Because I think yeah, I've got my own opinions, but I'll give the word over to you.
Sure, Mikhail. First off, my apology for mispronouncing your name because I didn't pronounce it in the Afrikaans fashion every time that you're in my chat. So apologies for that. Second, I'm a little disappointed. I thought we were going to talk about tech. I'm a techie from way back when, so
Oh,
we can talk about.
okay,
Yeah, I
sure,
used
we
to build
can.
computers, write
Oh,
code. And I've been using computers since I put IBM data punch cards into loading up
oh,
instructions. That's how long ago. And cassette tapes to load the operating system. That's how long I've been doing this. Anyway, but we can talk about that stuff in a bit if you want. But to answer your question specifically about education, yeah, no, education in Africa by and large is not education; it's memorization. Much of the education across Africa is simply rote memorization. Kids are taught to memorize things like times tables and words, and instead of being taught to learn and to think, they are fed stuff. And that's not an entirely accurate statement for the whole continent, but that's a by and large statement, general statement across the continent. You can go pick a school in Liberia, pick a school in Kenya, pick a school in South Africa, and you'll get the same outcomes because that's what's happening. And we have a problem when that happens. Kids should be taught to be literate in their home language, and preferably if you have the opportunity in another language, an international language. If you don't have an international language where you're at, is ideal to start kids in primary school with that. But it's not obligatory, but it's a good idea. And they should be taught to think for themselves, to question motivations and where information is coming from. But the other reason that topic came up in my broadcast is that World Bank has just discovered, although to be fair, they probably mentioned this in the past, but they've just come out reporting, they've just discovered that about half of parents in Africa, a little over half of parents in Africa, are frustrated or worried about where they're going to find fees to pay for school. Now, for an American, school fees, what is that, like to play baseball or play football or go to a field trip? No, we're talking about tuition. An American be like, what? I pay property taxes for tuition. That pays for the tuition. So our model is very different than much of the rest of the world. The concept of paying a fee to go to what should be a responsibility of society, and that's going to sound like I'm some kind of socialist, but I'm not. I believe in small government. However, society doesn't function without the rule of law. It doesn't function with an illiterate society. It doesn't function with the basic parameters of societal needs in place so that society can function. And one of those is illiterate population. You have to have a workforce that can read and write in a language and can think critically and make decisions. You don't get that unless you have free, well, you don't get it effectively unless you have free kindergarten through primary and secondary school. Every human being on the planet, in my view, is entitled. I don't like entitlements, but every human being should have free primary education, effective primary education, and secondary education. And we see it in countries with extremely high birth rates in Southeast Asia. When girls get education through primary school, population rates, reproduction rates drop drastically. When they get through secondary school, it really, I mean, the biggest drop is just getting through sixth or eighth grade, but getting through 12th grade also gets it down. And you wind up with a more stable population. You wind up with girls who understand who they are, understand their bodies, and are more assertive and more involved in society. So I think it's critically important. This is lacking across the continent in Africa. I've lived in 8 different countries and worked in over 40 countries in Africa. It's a problem everywhere.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Myself, I also put a very high value on a proper education and on education in general. I myself love learning new things. I love learning. I've always, I want to use the word pursued knowledge in a sense, and I think it's very important that whole, Africa as a whole has this like perception of being backwards. But I mean, if you look at some place now, like Nigeria, for instance, they are one of the leading countries in terms of the tech industry. Surprisingly enough, I mean, there's a lot of tech startups that's doing really amazing work in the fintech world. I mean, Nigeria has, I think, two or three unicorn companies that has very high evaluations in terms of in the banking industry and stuff like that. And I think we can kind of sort of transition into uh, speaking about tech. And I think it's very important in the modern age that you understand tech and that you know tech. And if you don't have a proper basic education, that's not going to be the case. You're not going to be able to develop all these like I mean, programming is a skill, but you cannot learn programming if you don't have a basic of maths or science or some sort of STEM background. And in that sense, I think it's very important. I don't know what your opinion is on that.
Sure, I got a thought on that. From a tech perspective, just a quick tech tip: move your mouse over off the screen because it's
Oh,
showing your menu
oh,
bar at the bottom of Zoom,
thanks.
which is a little distracting for the viewers. There's a
It's,
tech tip. No, but seriously, yeah, no, I don't think you have to have a STEM background to learn how to code, but it doesn't hurt. But what I can say is that you can train all the coders in the world. You can train all the people to build computers, to design, but you're not going to develop the culture of education and learning that you want unless you have proper education. I mean, you could teach those skills with rote memorization, but there's no entrepreneurialism, there's no flair,
yeah.
there's no innovativeness there's no flowering of ideas. One of the reasons why America's been so successful over the past centuries, particularly in innovation, technology, science, space, everything, is because people have the ability to fail here and come back. People have the
Mm,
ability to take chances here and come back. People have the ability to have wild, crazy ideas and come back. In the 1990s, there was a guy who came up with a program, which essentially would have been a plugin or app today. It was called PointCast. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Unfortunately for him, it was a great idea at the time, but there were two problems. The first problem was that there wasn't sufficient bandwidth with dial-up modems around the internet in the early 1990s, about 1994, 95. And the second problem was that what he was offering, while I loved it and I used it, it was a commodity that was going to quickly be commoditized and be of no value to him. People basically give it away for free. And what he did is he had a little app that loaded up on the top or bottom of your screen, and it ran news across the bottom. And it would, take you to news, click on it, takes you to news story,
uh-huh.
Associated Press, here, there, the other, and weather and stock quotes. And it was absolutely brilliant. It was called Pointcast. It was lovely. But that kind of idea doesn't flourish in a state controlled system. It
Yeah.
doesn't flourish in a rote memorization educational system. It doesn't flourish in a society that doesn't have basic liberties and inalienable rights like freedom of expression, freedom of speech, which are on the retreat here in the United States. And that's a troubling sign for us going forward.
Yeah, definitely.
Still there.
I agree. What's the
No, I'm
mouse?
sorry. It's still
Uh,
there for some reason. You've seen your menu at the bottom. I don't know why it's showing up
uh,
there. My bad.
uh,
I thought it was your mouse. Anyway, whatever. It's
uh,
there.
let's do this. Maybe I can enlarge the screen a
Are
little.
you full screen?
I might not be actually.
That
Might be.
that might be what it is. The window might be.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Anyway, yeah, it's fine for now.
that's fine. Yeah.
It's fine for now.
Anyway, maybe
Um.
using Apple products.
Yeah, actually, yeah, I'm actually in a virtual box that runs Windows. So
Ah,
my main operating system is a Linux operating system. So I run
ah,
Linux, and then I run all the separate for all the separate stuff. I have different virtual boxes on my PC. So yeah,
gotcha. That's what it's a
it's
virtual box. It's bringing in the bottom of the box. That's why it's there. Okay.
it's probably that. But it's been the I prefer to do it this way. Then I have a very large control or overall control on what packets get sent, and yeah, I'm a bit of a security. I love the world of cybersecurity, so yeah, for me it's very interesting to see how much Windows and all these big corporations actually mine data from you. But yeah, that's a separate topic.
Well,
That
never mind the data mining. It's the vulnerabilities they leave there.
yes, hundred
That's the
percent.
bigger
Yeah,
concern. A
yeah.
lot of vulnerabilities in these systems, intentional and unintentional. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Look, to come back to what I still wanted to ask you as well. You mentioned you were a techie, but I assume that when you were in the army you mainly focused on technology, or what was your job mainly
No,
involved
no,
with?
it's so I've been in and around and touching technology all along. So I'm like Inspector Gadget. I'm early adopter of everything. You pick something except for not Point Cast, except for Snapchat, and I was there from the very beginning, right?
Yeah.
Very beginning. In fact, for instance, my first ever hard drive was in 1989. I bought a hard drive
Wow.
from Hard Drives International in Tempe, Arizona, 20 megabytes, 20 megabytes for
Yes.
$319.
Wow. Wow.
I just
Yeah.
had one of these solid state drives, which is like a USB thumb drive,
Yeah.
2 terabytes for $114 delivered to my door in one day.
Yeah.
And I've
It's
just expanded. I've added 40% more storage to my gaming machine by sticking this in a port on the inside. Anyway, but
yeah.
it's just back in the late 70s, I messed around with computers and just load the IBM data punch cards in there. Didn't really understand if I was learning it. Then in high school, I had a lot of spare time. We got computers, we got Commodore CBMs and PETs.
Commodores.
Yeah. And that's yeah. And so then I started messing around PCs. When I taught at university, I had Macs, which were garbage. I hated them. Lots of hard drive errors and disk allocation problems. But
Yeah.
I used to program in BASIC, and what else did I program in? Did I do COBOL? I'm trying to remember. I never did C plus. That came later.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I kind of messed around Fortran, but didn't really understand it very well. So I stepped away from it. I was one of the first people to use hypertext markup language and the tags, and published my first websites already in early 1995. Late
Well, that's
94
like
is when I wrote that. Yeah. So
that's like
that's
on the cusp of the internet just becoming a thing, eh?
it
Uh,
was. And
very.
I contemplating getting out of the army. I had offers from Yahoo and from Excite back then, and I considered getting out. But there was so much I want to accomplish in the army. And I
Yeah.
don't regret it, but I did miss the tech revolution from the standpoint of being in Silicon
Yeah.
Valley and being part of it and becoming fabulously wealthy. But that's not what life is about, at least not to me. So I don't regret it, but it would have been an interesting path to take. So I'm always been into tech. In the army, I worked in intelligence, and so technology is a key aspect of what we were doing all the time. I worked at the National Security Agency when we came up with Cybersecurity Command,
Yeah.
and all that was taking place, the Cyber Command. And I've been using technology and IT for exploitation and or going after adversaries for my entire life. So it's always been a part of what I do, and I value it, but I also understand the limitations of it.
Yeah.
And Skynet scares the bejesus out of me.
Yeah, that's especially like stuff like Chat GPT that has recently made waves in the I guess the whole world. And because AI is such a black box in a lot of these cases, I think we need to tread very lightly. And it's a very it's a very scary thought to think about that power or that technology power, and then put that on top of something like a quantum computer that has infinitely more processing power than a normal supercomputer or normal server. You know that it tends to become a little bit worrisome to, and yeah, especially with all the people in charge being the people in charge, if I can put it that way. The absolute censorship that they like to enforce on a lot of these things. It's scary.
Well, you go back 10 years ago and people were dissing Wikipedia, Jimmy Wales Wikipedia. They said, oh, this is just garbage in, garbage out. Well, there's truth to that, but studies have looked at it very carefully, and the curating of the pages, at least in the early stages of the first 10 years, so we're pretty good. When someone would trash a site and put fake information up there, it would be removed pretty quickly, and notes made about it, and those people prevented from doing it. But the thing about it is that they worry about people posting something invalid on Wikipedia. But they've said nothing about the people that puts the code inside of Chat GPT, and it's Microsoft adversary, and it's Google adversary that are coming out now. And what's the grease? What's the soup inside there? Because these things, we've already seen the bias in Chat GPT. It's biased against conservatives and biased in favor of leftists, and it falsely reports things. How do we fix that? I mean, that thing spits something out and it's owned by a big corporation that has a huge influence over the world. Whereas I can post on, as an editor, as a contributor editor on Wikipedia, which I have been for years, I can post something on there. And if it's wrong, someone has a recourse. They can appeal it. They can have it removed. They can do something. But with this AI that's coming out there, these corporations are really just going to feed us shit and leave us in the dark like mushrooms.
Yeah, no, look, I 100% agree with you. That very fine line that you walk in terms of, and personally, I think the only way to solve it is to have unbiased data as training sets. The thing is, again, who decides on if a
What's
data
unbiased?
what's unbiased? If you have a person that's right leaning, he will say, okay, no, but the left leaning stuff is not correct. Is not right. Let's rather use X or Y, and yeah, it becomes now a big conversation about ethics and ethical use of AI, in my opinion. And I think because AI is such a new tech, there's so little understanding out there about how this works that people tend to say, okay, but why can so there's multiple examples online where people ask, listen, write a poem, or to ask ChatGPT, write a poem admiring Donald Trump, for instance, and then the AI language will spit out a generic response like, I'm an AI model, I can't write a poem to say X or Y about some individual or some political individual. But then then the very next prompt they ask, okay, write a poem admiring Joe Biden, for instance, right? And then it writes this like long poem with like 4 or 5 verses, and that just shows me that the engineers that's in charge of the AI either trained the model on a certain specific political leaning set of data, or they have hard coded parameters or parameterization in the AI that prevents the AI from even generating response if certain keywords are picked up. And that again, that's the question: who's going to look under the hood? I mean, no one's governing these people, or no one's governing these bodies. They pretty much have free reign on doing whatever they need and or whatever they want, and that's to me personally that's a big problem.
Well, it's even more frightening now. I mean, in the past, you have the airbrushing of history out of history. People just don't like it or ignore it. They change it. They put it in textbooks and it disappears. I mean, for instance, how many people talk about in glowing terms about Robert Sobukwe and the liberation movement in South Africa? Almost an unknown figure now, and one of the most important luminaries in the effort to
Yep.
achieve, freedom for all South Africans. But he's not an ANC acolyte, so forget about him. They co-opted Steve Biko's Black Consciousness movement, and they can't do that without acknowledging Biko. But they erroneously and dishonestly claim that Biko was in the ANC. He's not. He had nothing to do with the ANC. He was a student at university, so a student leader. But no, it's now when that is something that you can't find alternate sources for because everything's digitized, it's all there, and someone's controlling it, and they're doing it through AI or they're doing it through just updating and changing database. It's quite a frightening prospect here. As a kid in public school. Now I had a decent public school education. I was literate at the end of it, and to me, that's decent. Also, given the times and what kids learn today, I think I learned a relatively slightly left of center, but not too far, or center political viewpoint. Not that my instructors were political, but the information I was given was mostly accurate. But there was one thing that was very much inaccurate that I learned growing up, and that was in school. We were taught that 50 million Africans were brought in slavery to America. Well, it's preposterous. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to go 50 million Americans. What was the population in 1861 when the Civil War started? What was the population of America when the slave trade ended in 1808? What was the population of America in 1790 in our first census? 3.1 million people. How could 50 million Africans have come to America? And they all died on the ships coming over. No, a portion died on the ships coming over. If they all died, then there wouldn't have been any slaves. If 90% died, it wouldn't have been profitable. So just a bit of common sense and critical thinking come into play here. But, we were brainwashed into believing this because it was so horrible. But here's the reality. Somewhere between 8 and 12 million Africans were shipped to the Americas. not to North America or to what became the United States, the Americas. No more than about 300,000 Africans ever entered this country and what became this country in bondage. No more than 300,000. As many white Europeans came here or more in bondage to this area, but they weren't kept. They got their freedom after a few decades. Yep. But the point is that the distortions and lies. Most of the Africans that wound up in slavery wound up in the Caribbean Basin or in Brazil. 90+% of them, almost 100%. So, that's just one example of how things, and we constantly hear about this, the original sin of slavery for America. Really? America invented slavery? It didn't exist in Greece or Rome or African kingdoms or China or India. Yeah, hell yeah, it did. Even in Oceania, slavery existed and existed for thousands of years. We simply got in line with everybody else when we came along. So anyway, it just shows you that how that can be manipulated. Now, that was without AI. That was without the internet. That was, in the days when, we just got electricity back then and paved roads, So, so if you can do that in that day, imagine what you can do to distort the worldview. People actually think in America is systemically racist. They're morons. They have no ability to think critically and they're dishonest, but they think it's systemically racist. Technically it is. Affirmative action is systemically racist.
Yeah, well, I mean, someone who comes from South Africa, or someone who lived there and worked there in SA for quite a while, or in South Africa for a while, I can categorically tell you that that is not the case. I mean, there's a lot more, or there's a lot from a racist perspective. There's a lot more going on in other countries in terms of oppressing a minority than in America. The okay, you mentioned affirmative action. We've got similar things in SA. The BEE, thing is a big point of contention as well. But the point is that I think from all the countries in the world, I think America is the most free in terms of stuff like that. But yeah, it's a very broad statement. Of course, there's obviously certain states that struggles with certain stuff. But I mean, who doesn't have problems in in the country or in their countries, right? And just to touch on the point that you made earlier, I think America was also the first country in the world to abolish slavery. Back then, they were the first to say that this is wrong. We should stop. To your point,
well, not entirely correct. Let me correct you on that point, but you're not too far off. The first country to legally abolish slavery in the world was Haiti. After they overthrew, they murdered 40,000 French men and women, raped and dismembered them, and then they abolished slavery. So that was the beginning of the 19th century. Then the United Kingdom abolished slavery before we did. The United States abolished the international slave trade in 1808. It was effective January 1808. So from that time forward, importing slaves was illegal. Now, some people tried it. There were slave runners in ships that brought them over, tried to evade the Navy, which was pretty small, and got away with it on occasion. But we, and people talk about it. They don't even tell the whole history there. We had a slave trading captain whose ship was about to be captured. So they offloaded their slaves on these little islands in Louisiana, and then they scuttled the ship to hide the evidence. Well, he was arrested, he was tried, and he was executed. He was hung for importing slaves. So, people tell us that we don't take it very seriously. That was in 1808 that law went into effect, passed in 1806. And we were one of the first countries in the world after Haiti and the United Kingdom to abolish. In fact, if you look at slavery was still present in North Africa with white Europeans, going on to the 1890s. It was still happening, and it was happening around the world. Legalized slavery, but we ended it in 1865 on December 6th with the adaptation of the 13th Amendment to our Constitution, which banned human chattel. Yep. So we're one of the first, but not the first.
So I just got a notification. We've got apparently 10 minutes left. I'm not on the premium version of Zoom, so.
Okay. All right. Well, I see that. It just came on the screen there. Well, I do have the premium version. Sorry, I wish I paid for a client license. So.
It's fine. No worries. So just it was a very, very interesting conversation. Thank you very much for coming onto the channel, Chris. But just to wrap things up, I see that Chat has been talking about the education. The education topic here quite vigorously. So it's interesting. But to touch back on the slavery thing, I think people tend to believe what they want to believe if it fits their narrative, and AI certainly, the censorship and AI does not help with it creating these echo chambers that everyone lives in. And the moment you challenge these echo chambers, they tend to get mad at you and start yelling and say, "No, okay, cancel this guy, or do X, or do Y, or do this." And it's dangerous to do this, because then you basically squash any new ideas that might be very liberating to certain people. And I think it's become a sickness of the woke left, to do this. Conservatives is not necessarily blameless in this action, but yeah, I think
Oh,
that's
no. So-called conservatives are also part of this. This Senate Bill 686, which is intended to target evil countries like China, North Korea, Iran, Russia, and any one of those countries that has a commercial interest with more than 1 million Americans. And they're not including Americans, including foreign nationals that are here. They're just inter-country. Any 1 million accounts over a 12-month period, then they can be shut down. They can be taken. The government can stop them. Basically, what it is, though, is it's an effort to. I mean, it even touches on quantum computing and networks and satellite connections and databases and cloud computing. It's basically an effort for censorship. And a co-sponsor of this bill is Republican Senator John Thune of South Dakota. So that's conservatism. That's nonsense. This is look. But most of this is on the left. That's for sure.
yeah.
But here's the thing. I mean, I challenge anyone to ever find on my channel any content I've ever produced, serious content, not satire. We have satire. Can't take a clip for 3 seconds and say that's real.
Of
But
course.
genuine content, which I've ever advocated against any group based on their faith, based on their ethnicity, based on their skin color, based on their origins, never happened. The only people I demonize and go after are corrupt politicians and anyone on the political left that believes in socialism and communism, because you're just stupid if you do. Sorry.
Communism has worked out so well for millions of starving people in the past. I'm sure you guys can do it right this time. I mean, you're special, man. You go ahead and try and make it work.
You are the unique case. It's going to work.
Yes, exactly. That's precisely it. And yeah, I think that, yeah, the only thing that we can do to prevent it is to speak out, I guess, and be the voice of reason in this endless sea of nonsense and censorship.
Well,
And
the other
journalism.
piece, Mikkel, is this religion of diversity. Now, people, when I start talking about this, the left will start freaking out. For the patriarchy, white old men. No, never said that. Never said that. I never said that diversity is a bad thing. But I talk about genuine diversity of thought, diversity of experience, not diversity based on sexuality, religious or religious affiliation, or your ethnicity or your skin color. That's not real diversity. I can find you dozens of Black Americans who think exactly the way I do. If we get in a room, there's no diversity there. We're the same. We just have different skin color. That's all. We look different in the sun, but we're exactly the same. That's not genuine diversity. Diversity does not make us stronger. It can make us stronger, but there's no guarantee of that. No guarantee of that. You can have chaos when you have diversity. And I'm talking about genuine diversity and fake diversity. But anyway, this nonsense of this, show me one country with a bunch of ethnicities, a bunch of faiths that's successful other than Switzerland. And I'm waiting. India, nope. China, nope. South Africa, nope. Give me a list. There is almost no country in the world that has vast type of differences of these different groups and they get along. That doesn't mean it's impossible. Switzerland does it, but it's one of the few examples. Belgium can't pull it off. The Belgians, between the Germans, the Flemish, and the French speakers, they just can't get it together. So anyway.
Yeah,
there you go.
That's 100% correct. I 100% agree with you. But yeah, again, thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to appear on the small channel. I really appreciate it, and yeah, it was very fun chatting to you. We can definitely do it again. In the future, I will set it up again. I think yeah, some of my viewers also says that they had. They really enjoyed it, so yeah, I'll
right,
definitely get you on again. It was really fun. Thanks, Chris.
All right, thanks a lot. My pleasure.
Have a good one. Bye. Thanks, everyone.